So I'm also a co-investigator in the MeHeLP project. I'm based in London. I'm at Middlesex University. Although my research it takes place mainly in Southeast Asia, South Asia, and also among refugee populations. And so I specialize in cultural global mental health and visual anthropology. And in Middlesex University, I teach on the subject, cultural global mental health, as well as visual psychology, which is what I'm going to be talking about in my presentation today. So I think I'm going to start sharing the screen so that hi Raghu, you're with us.
Hi.
Hi.
Can everyone switch on their videos, please? It would be very
yeah.
In your videos.
It does help to be able to see people. Whoever is in a possibility to actually show themselves, it makes it a bit more human rather than talking with the screen. But thank you for those of you who can do that. So I'm going to be sharing my PowerPoints. There we go. Okay, so what I'm going to be talking about is around the using of film for inclusive conversation in mental health, which links very nicely with what we had just heard before in this very excellent opening session today. So some of the examples you heard about today, I will also be referring in my presentation. Just wanted to give a very little historical background around the use of images, still images in this case, in the history of mental health. So this is Charcot in 1888, already was using photograph for depicting the physical states of hysterics. And this one was really kind of the beginning of development of neurology and psychology. And he really was the first to recognize that photographs show more than other photographer or photographic subject might have intended. So this is to say that looking at psychology, there was already, right before even psychology basically became a discipline, already there was the use of photographs within what then later we call mental health. But in the last decades, we have noticed a global surge in interest in visual research methods, particularly photography and film. And also word and number-based researchers are more and more coming to realize that there is considerable potential for gaining knowledge if image-based methodologies are adopted. So I want to start, and I'm going to stop sharing now so I can see you, or I can see you in this way. Just having you all give me an idea around what you think might be some of the benefits of using visual methods. And I'd like you to focus in particular around the use of film and documentary applied mental health research, in particular also for advocacy and activism. Just your thought, what do you think was going to be some benefits? And of course, some of the speakers before me spoke about some of the advantages within the MeHeLP, but try to think more broadly. You can chat or you can unmute yourself. Okay.
I think it is very, very useful because I have tried it in teaching students and also in public awareness programs. And even conducted an exhibition along with the film festival in which we used clips from the popular films, small short clips of 2 minutes duration from various films, right from the Lost Weekend in 1940s, which shows the alcohol dependence.
Okay. And what have you seen? Sorry, go ahead.
No. You are free to interrupt.
So you have experience actually using films in this platform, which is fantastic. Can you tell me what are some of the benefits you have noticed when you have, in these examples you have given me?
One is most of them have already seen those films, very popular films. And secondly, it's actually in a context. For example, Patch Adams, Robin Williams is in a funny situation in which there is a group therapy going on. And there is a man with the catatonia sitting like this with one hand up. And everybody is mocking him. But when you show that and tell this is catatonia, people have an aha feeling. Oh, this is what it is. It actually shows waxy flexibility. Robin Williams catches the hand of this man and put it like this. It remains like this. So even catatonia is demonstrated there.
So, okay.
That's it. Then another film, Vincent Van Gogh is in the asylum. He's painting something. And the nurse is coming and asking, what you're painting? I'm not seeing anything through the window. because it's not so beautiful outside. You're having a very beautiful painting. So creativity, mental illness, all those things are discussed actually directly. But when you point out this is that, that's very, very interesting to people.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for sharing. It's very, very useful. And just looking in the chat, and what you said connects also to what Chitra, I believe, want to say when she writes, provide an appropriate portrayal compared to imaginary scenes. So make somehow more present, more real, more potentially appropriately represented compared to other platforms. Asha also writes, powerful portrayal captures multiple dimensions, and I think this point is very, very important. The ability of in one scene, one sequence of scenes representing different aspects. So the multiplicity. Also, it's a more natural, it's more appealing than theoretical medium. Yeah. Thank you. And anybody else? If there is anything else you want to share, please write in the chat. I'll have a look, but I think all what you're writing, it is very important, and I will get to a second about how did I become interested exactly in using film in my own work. So just there is a lot of authors have been reflecting around the potential of using videos and films within also the kind of the academic realm. For example, Grasseni speaks around skilled vision. She writes, video might become a route to ethnographic knowledge that provides a deeper understanding of our informants' way of seeing, knowing, and understanding. So this aspect that can go more in depth, which partially goes to what Asha was saying as well, allowing multiplicity. It also can be able to capture much more than simply visual reality, but also is a very powerful tool, which is also what was referred to in the chat. What I found in doing research through film, which is mainly what I teach about, it links also to what McDougall argues, which is that because images allow us to learn experientially, what they produce is a different kind of knowledge. And this, I think, is very important, particularly the kind of topics we are dealing with within mental health, applies very much to what he says when he writes not only a certain phenomena particularly suitable for study by visual means, but they are also extremely difficult to approach in any other way, as certainly has been the case in the kind of work that I've been doing. So visuals, images, and the films can be used in some ways to generate data, to be able to actually be an instrument for understanding, for knowledge, but also a very powerful tool for dissemination of knowledge, generating an impact. For example, having this important conversation in mental health that we want to see happening. So I'll take a little bit through how for me the approach has actually been, and actually my approach to using visuals, particularly film, in mental health, has really began in India. So we go exactly where this conference is taking place, where I was doing research in Haridwar around spirituality and spiritual healing and prevention of suicide. And I was doing research using questionnaires, focus groups, so more traditional method of research. But I also I love photography and filming just as a passion. So I always have camera with me when I go in the field. And I also was taking photographs and short clips about what I was witnessing as part of this research in an ashram where I was doing my research and in the surrounding area of Haridwar. So I also make a little documentary called Haridwar, A Spiritual Journey. And I then did an exhibition in Melbourne, in Australia, where I was then located. I was showing some of these photographs, projecting this documentary. But in some ways, this kind of activity was parallel to my academic research activity. So was not much used for conversation, was more to take some of my work outside of the academic world. Similar was for my research done in Japan shortly after, where I was looking at rituals and traditions taking place in Japan, and I did a photography exhibition, which, as you can see here, was part of a group show where people would just come and see my photographs. But at some point, I realized I did not just want to incorporate images in my anthropological and psychological discourses, but I wanted to make uses of images as a method for doing research, but more importantly, of film as a process for discovery and change. And that was the key element. So using these films as a way, which was my way of knowing and doing research, also as a part of the process of making impact for the changes I want to see in mental health. And my first project that really was achieving this was called Breaking the Chains. I don't know if some of you might have seen it. Otherwise, I'll give you a link in a second where you can know more about this project. But was an ethnographic photo and film documentary project around human rights violations against mentally ill in Indonesia. And just to give a very, very brief overview about the topic, in Indonesia, there is a practice quite widespread called pasung, which refers to the physical restraint or confinement or criminals, crazy and dangerously aggressive people. This practice is quite widespread in Indonesia, but we also know it's present in other low-income countries, unfortunately, including India, but also some form of human rights abuses against people with mental illness happen everywhere in the world, also in higher-income countries. So in this project, I used ethnographic documentary, so anthropological filmmaking, as my main way of doing research and making films around three aspects of this project. One, I made Breaking the Chains, the main documentary, where I was following a little organization in one part of Java, which is the main bigger island in Indonesia, where I was following an organization of people who experience mental health illness themselves, who was going in the community, finding people who were being chained or caged or were suffering for different kind of human rights abuses, and they were working with the family and the community to try to free them and provide to them a better mental health care. So this kind of a documentary really followed their activity, and this is where MeHeLP took place. And then I also made another link to documentary, which is called Fifa Password Anto Story, where actually I followed a young man, and I actually lived with him in his house for a brief period. And his family, where I've actually worked with this person with the mental health issues, who also had been chained several times, to make a testimony style documentary, which depicts his own experience around being restrained, and also how he made sense of the experience and how he was reintegrated in the community. So this documentary was released a few months ago, and you can also watch it on my website. And then I'm continuing working around this topic, making other films around it, as well as photography collection around human rights issues. But more or less, this kind of work really belongs to what we can define an applied activist and public use of audiovisual tool, which, as Pink says, where the experiences of those who are normally invisible become possible to be seen, and their voices and feelings to be heard. And these are very important element in the kind of conversation in mental health that we want to see. And she says, and I think applies also to psychology, other mental health disciplines, the current context is one where applied and public visual anthropology has an increasing role to play. And that's how I began kind of something which I call the visual psychology, which I am currently teaching, and where I'm trying to apply this kind of approaches to film, also to mental health in particular. So I know we don't have a lot of time to look at the films, but if you want to look at them, my website, and maybe later about in the chat, it's called The Movement, as the word says itself, it's a kind of an activist way of using movie, and this is Breaking the Chains. What I want to focus now in the second part of my lecture, but let me see first if there is any question, any comment to what I said so far. If there is any question, any comment, please do let me know. No. Then I will continue, and then we are going to be doing an activity together. So I want to talk more now around the participatory and collaborative visual methods for inclusive conversation in mental health, which also refers to some of the methods you just heard before in the opening session. So these kind of methodologies, I see them as be part of what we can call a participatory action research, which were originally designed as research that is committed to working with participants against social oppression. And the aim is really to empower and change through the process of doing research. So this is kind of the umbrella where we can situate these kind of methods. My journey with this kind of particular methodology, where you are really working with people who experience mental health issues, to create stories with them, to be used to then for different kind of advocacy and activist purposes to produce change, really began with my grandfather. So a few years back, I made a film about him, about his experience around post-traumatic distress, and it was a kind of visual ethnography about him. You can also find this film where I was kind of working with my grandfather brother to make stories around him since actually I was a little child. So the movie starts with me with a tape recording of when I was 8 years old. Then I've been working with artists in Australia to try to use a different kind of forms of art forms for having them who had the experience of being suicidal, as well as having lost somebody through suicide, sharing their experience with others through the use of arts and visual methods. Particularly, my work has been strongly with Mick Hills, who was what we call a suicide survivor, because his brother killed himself, but also Mick himself tried to take his life several times. And so these are some of his artwork. We did an exhibition with him and other two artists around their experiences around suicide. And then we also made a couple of films, so you can watch them on our website, about Mick's experience of his own suicidality. But then I've been working also with the people with severe mental illness in different countries using a method called participatory video, which is a set of techniques aimed to involve a group or community in shaping and creating their own film. In this case, storytellers make their own films based on issues that matter to them, either as individual or as member of the community, and they also control the way they actually are represented. And I found the participatory video is a very, very powerful means of documenting and sharing local people experiences, needs, and hopes from their own perspective. Because in this case, the storytellers create their own story in the way they want to create them, and I very much work with them so that they can actually also be the people making the story, not just the people whose story is about. To have a complete inclusive experience around what actually they want to share with others. Now, I can't integrate within this methodology what you just heard about, digital storytelling techniques as well, which, as you already have heard, but just for those of you who might have missed the section, is a research community engagement method that combines the cultural power of the first-person narrative with digital technologies and a facilitated workshop to support participants to explore and represent the life experiences that are particularly meaningful to them. So there is two projects I'm going to be mentioning here before then I close my kind of more lecture presentation. One is called Funding Our Way, where in Australia I worked with 10 people with severe mental illness from migrants and refugee background. We did a series of workshops for them to create their own stories. So they literally had to technically editing their own stories, deciding which stories to tell. And you can find all these stories in my website, and they've been widely used in Australia by the people themselves as well as organization for different kind of educational programs to have those conversations about mental health, where the person is actually the primary vehicle for sharing those kind of stories. So they are telling the story that they want to be told about them. Then, similar to this, as part of Together for Mental Health, which is a project I'm going to talk in 1 second about, I also organized workshops. In this case, a bit differently. I partnered psychology students at Majaya Catholic University in Jakarta with 11 members of a community organization of people with severe mental illness. We've done 2 days intensive workshop, and then people have been working together over a month to then create short films. So students together with somebody experiencing a severe mental illness to make short films. And then we had a film festival in Jakarta just before COVID really hit, and then we had prizes and awards. So you can also watch this film in my website, and they are very, very inspiring. Now, as I mentioned, this particular video was part of Together for Mental Health, which is a project using collaborative visual research methods to understand the experiences of mental illness, coercion and restraint in Ghana, Indonesia, that I was leading as a principal investigator. And this project aims to explore attempts by mental health workers to establish collaboration with faith-based and traditional healers to prevent the use of coercion and provide care for people with mental illness. This project uses both the participatory methods, so participatory video just mentioned, together with the method I mentioned at the beginning, which is around ethnographic film. So basically in this project, we have brought these two methods together, these learnings together, to be able to produce ethnographic film as well as participatory video. And also this project has confirmed that visual methods, particularly film, can be very effective tools to raise awareness on mental health and human rights issues and advocacy advocating for change. Now, if you have time at the end, maybe I'll play you the trailer of Harmony, which is our Indonesian film made from this project, but just want to close with a couple of statements around the importance of thinking around. Today we live in a very much in a visual society. We all have from mobile phones, digital and visual languages is what we are communicating mainly with. So I believe if they want to reach their goals, mental health disciplines cannot continue to escape this reality. We have to adapt to use this kind of methods, which, as you have seen in MeHeLP, definitely has embraced as a way of doing applied research. I'm going to put these two links in the chat so you can have them later, so you can have more of an in-depth look around this project. And then I'm going to move on to an exercise. But before I do that, let me go back to you. Yeah, and I want to see what. Okay, so experience about promoting mental health. But my work about promotion has been mainly around suicide, and also it's been about, so the project I shared before was called Live Inspired Lives, and was around people who actually had been touched by suicide in a different way, how they made sense of it, what actually is helping them to choose to live. So that is kind of the work I'm mainly focused on in terms of promotion, and you can have a look at my website. So it's called Inspired Lives. There is the catalog of the exhibition, where, as mentioned, I worked with different artists, as well as a link of the film made with Mick, which has been definitely used a lot for prevention of suicide campaigns. Then is my work with mental disorders. My work is so far has been mainly around suicide, domestic violence with Indian migrant women, and severe mental illness in migrants, refugee communities, as well as in Southeast Asia and South Asia. So that's what I'm mainly been working on so far. That's my passion. To you, thank you to you. Any other question or comment? When you get these films, how do you go about building the narratives? Like, what stories to include in the film? A very good question. So I gave you a very short overview because we don't have a lot of time. A short overview about different techniques. So the kind of way I create narratives is kind of a bit different from mainstream filmmaking, because for me, film is part of my research process. So in the more ethnographic documentary style, basically the narratives are what comes out of the field. So I instead of taking notes, as Sanjan is doing now, I go in the field with my camera, also taking notes with my camera, usually with the researchers, if I can have a team with me, and I film what actually I see, observe, I'm asked questions, I'm interview people, but I mainly film what I see in their daily life connected to my research topic. And then basically, as you analyze transcripts from analyze a transcript from interviews, or you look at your quantitative data, I look at the footage I have and the transcript from the footage to see what actually are the themes that are emerging, what actually is coming out from the data, and then this analysis brings me to actually create narratives and create a film. So the films are a visual representation of my research data. So, and that's how the narrative I created. This is actually what has come out in the field through my field trip. That's more the ethnographic documentary approach. For the digital storytelling and participatory video approach, the narratives are made by the people themselves. So in the workshops, I work with other facilitators to help people decide what story they want to tell, what are the kind of narratives about themselves and their experiences that they want to share with others. And then we support them technically, sometimes, as I mentioned, for the funding of our way project, having filmmakers supporting them, but for the project in Indonesia, having students in the case working with them, so supporting for them to actually create their own story. So they actually tell the story they want to tell in the way they want to tell. So if you look at the links that I gave you before, and I'm going to post them, you can actually see very different kind of stories. Some of them use animation, drawings. Some of them have actually just spoken in front of the camera, depending how comfortable they are to disclose their identity. So there are different ways in which films can be done, but the way for me that I do it is actually directly part of the research process, and try to use an approach where people really feeling that as much as possible, the story they want to tell it is what I try to share with the public. Thank you, Divya. Yeah, I actually love that too. Before this workshop, I was having a meeting with the Indonesian team and another project to make more stories with them. Unfortunately, online because I cannot fly to Indonesia. So we are now trying to build a new way of doing this online. So if you're interested, look at my website. I'm just going to post it now before we forget. And then you can follow. And if you follow the website, you can actually get updates around the new projects when there are film releases. Yeah, so that's my webpage. So where you can follow these projects. Okay. If you have more questions, write them down. But I want. I don't know if you can see my screen and the Sanjana. Them into know when are we going with time? I think we still have a
No,
good time.
we have time. We have around 20 minutes.
Heaps of time. Fantastic. So while you're thinking questions, I love questions, but I also want you to think a little bit. So what I want you to think in terms of yourself, and what you're doing and where you're coming from. And I would like all of you, also those ones who already know, to actually take part in this exercise. So I would like you to think about an applied mental health research topic. Could be something linked to mental health literacy, or it is a topic of our conference, or something else within always applied mental health research, or an issue you just feel very strongly about, that you think is an important conversation to have in mental health, which is a conversation that you maybe think is not happening enough, or is not happening in the way you would like it to see. So think anything that you're passionate about, and where you think a film will be, or film of different kind, like the example I've given you, or a fictional film, or whatever you can think about, a film would be a suitable or even an ideal tool for these urgent conversations to be happening to ignite change. Okay, so think a topic and then try to identify and share why. So why do you think this film is important to be made? Film can be also participatory video, digital storytelling, yeah. But think, why does this film need to be made? What do you see happening in this film? So like think more about what, when, where will take place in this film, and think about how. Which kind of techniques would you like to use? What are some ethical issues and other also methodological issues you need to consider? So I like to give you all 2-3 minutes to just maybe write down, and if you want, give a title, just any kind of working title to your film. So I'll give you a few minutes to accomplish this task, and then we can. I would like to hear from some example from you.
Can I think aloud with you?
Yes,
Erminia.
Asha. You can. Is that Sanjan? Asha? Asha?
Yeah, that's Asha here. Yeah.
Oh, Asha, you can think aloud with me anytime you want.
Be it mental illness, or this is also some thing I'm, looking at microaggressions recently.
Mm.
But I'm also thinking how applied research can be applicable. My voice is echoing.
Yeah, can you? I think somebody's not muted, so maybe if people are not talking, if you can mute yourself, maybe makes it. Yeah, thank you. Go ahead, Asha.
So, looking at microaggressions,
Mm.
be it like sexist in some of the cultures,
Mm.
or even microaggressions within the context of persons with mental illness.
Mm.
And applicability is how, even in different contexts, we document and highlight how these are always part of everyday life in
Mm.
certain people and gets internalized, becomes internalized stereotypes.
Mm.
Like
Yeah.
even in Kerala, I can see this in the form of gender roles that comes up in narratives. Sometimes it
Mm.
can be with marginalized identities. So there are
Mm.
microaggressions.
Mm.
So with each group, can this be captured and and also make it like tool for change, that people change their language,
Mm.
people change the way or it's basically mirroring what's happening, because sometimes it's really part, like maybe even I myself may come out with some statement which is like not appropriate,
Mm.
because it
Mm.
gets
Mm. Mm.
normalized in each cultures.
Mm.
So that's my thought, and I
Mm.
think it's an urgent need sometimes, even when we
Mm.
are educated, when we want, like yesterday also I was talking about how language is very important.
Yeah.
So I was thinking of microaggressions in
Mm.
everyday life and how small short pieces and with the different marginalized identities, if we capture, so will that translate into change? That's the applicability part.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's a very important topic, Asha. And now that to stay with your example about microaggression in different communities in India. So how do you think you could be doing this? So thinking about with the communities you already are working with, or the ones you know you have access to, which kind of approach do you think you could be taking for making the kind of film you're talking about, which are in the end not part of activism for changes in this context? What comes to your mind? What could you do? You're muted, my dear. And if everybody can also think about examples from their context, how can we help Asha to make this film? So what is the way you think we can suggest her to do it? Yeah, go
No,
ahead.
it can be even from schools. Like
Mm,
I keep talking, and I think Divya is also here. Now, if you're looking at rural context, there are schools, and how there are certain aspects that get internalized. Okay, I'm a girl, I have to behave in a particular way, and if I'm and also there are subtle remarks about being a girl. So now when we are using schools and young age, will we build this where we are working on behavioral change?
mm.
So if you're asking about where can this be located.
Yeah, but that might be where you will show this film. Let's think about which kind of films could you be making. So like if there is a project around the macroaggression, how could you get your stories to then be shown in schools? Or you want to
Stories
collect?
can be, as a researcher, we can really when we're looking at
Mm,
initially when I used to start teaching this in one of the classes, um, people were not very clear, but then when they were asked to really look in terms of what are some of the experiences, they
mm.
came back
Okay.
into the
Yeah.
class that as a Muslim, I face this. As a
Okay.
person coming from a marginalized community, these are
Mm,
certain subtle aspects. I'm coming from certain region in the country where there are certain remarks which are indicated. Oh,
mm.
how can you be like this? Oh, I cannot share a meal with you because you eat so and so.
Yeah.
I cannot walk with you because people will identify me as so and so.
Oh, yeah.
So then in their everyday conversations, people communicate like that. So
Mm,
when you are actually deliberating and presenting, people themselves will come back with their experiences of what they've experienced.
mm, 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 mm,
The thing is, we are not looking because certain aspects get very normalized.
mm. Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I think this can be a good example where, for example, using participatory videos where people, you're saying, the people make some short films about their experience and perhaps then emphasizing also about in then their understanding of the portrayal of microaggression to also represent those normalized behaviors which still had an impact on them. So they actually realize that it's not so normal, so to speak, and that could be potentially a very good tools for this kind of project. Having people making stories about themselves where they can share as much or as little as they feel comfortable to share. But then, the real stories are usually very powerful. That's why when we watch a movie, at the end of a movie, we see true story or inspired by true story. Always has, a strong effect on us because we go, oh, is it not fictional? It's actually this is somebody who's reflecting on their own life. So this can be a very powerful tool for to bring in these stories within some context, like in the school, and initiating important conversation. So using them as a platform to then open to other reflection about their own experience as aggressor as well as I don't like the word victim, but they say victim of aggression. So thank you for sharing your example, Asha. I would love to work on this with you, to be honest. Let's see, Chitra, the theme strikes me in the current context is a loss and grief, which is so influenced by social culture as well as individual factor. Yeah. Thank you, Chitra. And what do you think would be something interesting there? In which way could we use film as a method to have conversation around current loss and grief? I suspect you talk about COVID related. I suspect. I'm not sure.
That actually brings it to the focus, but I don't think. I mean, we talk about grief, loss, and grief now because of the pandemic. So much public. It's so popular now in public discourse. Otherwise, it's so individual. People do not realize that somebody is suffering, and the people around them just get back to their lives, and you are expected to get back to lives.
Mm, mm,
But that individual process, I think, is very important for well-being of the whole family.
mm,
And I think that's something which has not been discussed, or I mean, and it doesn't come from exactly you can't say it is just a mental health issue, but I think it is about well-being, and just like Dr. Srinivasamurthy said, it's about distress states in the society.
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
kind of, it's a continuum, isn't it? It keeps coming and going.
Yeah. It
And
is.
how do
It
you
is.
then have a conversation about such distress states? So that's
Mm.
interesting to me.
And I think this, I mean, it's something different from what I was presenting today. I was talking more about film to have conversation in terms more of advocacy and activism and all of that.
Yeah, that's what I
But
mean. When I hear Asha also, I think that comes from a very different
yeah,
perspective.
no, but still, I think I mean, so I'm not talking about this today. But I actually last year I did a course in Italy where I was very interested around using video for therapeutic purposes and for psychological support. And I think another space in today's context, particularly because people have access to mobile phones, more or less, not everybody, but definitely many more people than had access to cameras in the past. So something also to think about, for example, for loss and grief, is around using videos as a way, as a part of a process of almost a therapeutic process to help to make sense of the experiences.
I think it's also related to the literacy around it. I mean, I
Yeah,
don't see
yeah,
only the therapeutic process, but also understanding and
yeah,
having, awareness about and talking about death. It comes to talking about death also. So, which
yeah,
is almost a taboo in many societies.
yeah.
People actually do not talk about it. So, having a conversation
Mm,
about it
mm, mm.
actually makes sense to me.
Yeah, definitely. And it is a conversation that is very uncomfortable. It's actually very, very cultural. It's something that I notice a lot, for example, in my contest, which is the Italian contest, as you know.
Yeah.
We talk a lot about that since we are children. So, and that is very much present in a life all the time. And I found it interesting when I came to UK, the conversation, I never hear people talking about people
Yeah.
dying, that they own that. And it is such a cultural element, and the easiness or uneasiness with which we think about that, and then also think we prepare ourselves to that,
So I
our
think that's
own.
very, very interesting to see how
Mm,
death is seen, perceived, and even talked about. The conversations around death,
absolutely.
the loss, the
Absolutely.
emotion. So I think that's very, very.
Mm,
I mean, probably the context of COVID pandemic has, or now because I deal with a lot of palliative care, vulnerable populations as well.
mm,
This kind of looms large in my scene now, but personally too, because I
mm,
have had losses myself. But then
mm,
I think this is something which
mm.
has to come out in the open. So,
More. Yeah.
what better way than visual medium?
Mm, very important. Thank you for sharing, Chitra. Let's see if there is anybody else who has come up with an
Can,
example.
can,
Yeah.
can I?
Yeah, sure.
Definitely, film is a very powerful tool, and I don't know how to incorporate many of these ideas into research. Actually, uh, one of the prominent figures of psychiatry in India, Dr. Mohan Agashe, who is actually equally versatile in his theater and film pursuit,
Ah.
once told me that he is a specialist in smuggling psychiatry through cinema. He first introduced me that he's a smuggler who smuggles psychiatry
Mm,
through cinema.
mm, mm, mm.
So it's as powerful as that. Most of the I can remember most of the films in which dementia is portrayed
Mm,
was very much educational.
mm. Yeah,
And Tare Zameen Par, a movie, very popular movie, popularized the problems of children with learning disorders.
yeah,
So it can be that much powerful, and
yeah,
uh, somehow people definitely can empathize, experience the
yeah,
other side, which otherwise they could not.
yeah. Exactly.
Equally is the misconceptions,
Mm, mm, mm.
stigma
Yeah,
about mental illness that's also spread by many of the films.
yeah.
So, one point I think we can do is to study such bad portrayal, how the bad portrayal is affecting the
Mm,
people's idea about
mm,
the
mm, mm.
understanding about the mental illness.
Yeah.
That can be studied. Maybe the people after viewing the film, we may give a
Mm,
questionnaire and asked about their concept about the mental illness and all, about the
Yeah.
particular scene, what they think.
Mm.
What I find, what I think is, it's not the purpose of filmmaker to propagate the idea about mental illness or mental health.
Mm.
They are making, definitely they are making films.
Mm.
But every film, if you look into, you will see a psychological problem, a
Mm.
life situation, which is a crisis,
Mm.
or even a mental illness, subtly or clearly in most of the films. Um, Maybe I'm a psychiatrist, that's why I see it like that. Most of the people won't see. And when I ask the film directors or actors, they don't. Most of them don't think it like that.
Mm. Mm. Mm.
But nowadays, many of the good directors, they do research into mental illness and the particular situation, and they because they think that helps them to have a better picture,
Mm.
a better movie.
Mm.
So these
Yeah.
things should be, I think, how we can put into the research. Anyway, the negative effects can be studied.
Mm.
But what I tried is collecting clips of
Collecting. Yeah. Mm.
yeah,
Yeah.
from short, very short clips from the films. Like for example, the one movie I liked very much is Boys Don't Cry.
Mm.
Boys Don't Cry.
Yeah.
I have used that clips extensively for teaching postgraduates, because what you read or learn from textbook is entirely from different when you have a glimpse of the experience. So
Mm.
that makes the learning emotional and very deep seated.
More present, yeah. Experiential, as McDougall says.
Experience, yes.
And I think that something
Empathetic.
that people have been studying, and you can find some papers about this, is actually showing some films around mental health, mental illness, and giving questionnaires before the screening and after the screening to see some potential immediate change in terms of literacy and attitude. So some people have done studies like this, and perhaps with your students, this can be an interesting study to do. And I think it is important to see potentially the benefits in terms of improving attitudes, improving understanding, but also, unfortunately, some films can also increase stigma, increase discrimination, increase misunderstanding. And that's why I think it's important that the filmmakers, a script writer, do work with the mental health professionals, particularly mental health professionals with a wide understanding, not like a very kind of narrow understanding of mental health, broader understanding of mental health, but working together to be able to make sure that the film potentially doesn't do further damage, because that has happened, like with the films around suicide, which obviously are the ones where I'm mainly informed and involved about. There is often the danger of potentially passing on some messages that could increase risk for suicide. Like right now, I've been contacted by actually a politician to be senator in Indonesia, who is also a psychiatrist, who is also now become a filmmaker, because she's making a film about suicide, which is going to go on Netflix, and she's completely like stuck because she's so scared of the way that to represent this issue. Although she's a psychiatrist, as I mentioned herself, so she's asking for my help to help for the script that she's doing. So yeah, that is going to be an interesting adventure for me too.
Two
Mainly
more
we have
comments, because you were interested. Just 1
Hey,
minute.
Sanjana, yeah, yeah.
Because you were interested in suicide
Ah,
research.
okay.
Two film clips which I use is, one
Ah,
is from the the song, suicide song, Gloomy Sunday.
yeah, 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 yeah.
Yeah, that scene where
Uh,
she sang and she shoots herself and commits
yeah,
suicide.
yeah, yeah,
Another
yeah.
is the suicide scene of Virginia Woolf
Yeah, and
in one of
that's
the
very
movies.
dangerous. Yeah. Yeah, so the
She
suicide is
drowned
particularly
herself.
dangerous, the way it's portrayed. I think Sanjana wants to tell us that we have no more time. Sanjana, am I correct?
we don't have
Many
time.
Yeah.
other
Okay.
situations, very interesting and very touching situations in which the protagonist commits suicide, and
Yeah.
that makes the understanding of the student or the viewer very deep.
Mm.
I prefer to use short clips, because
Yeah.
the whole
Yeah.
movie will
Yeah.
be
Can be
different.
too much. Yeah.
They are
Yeah.
telling a
Yeah.
whole different story, but a
Yeah.
clip, a particular situation,
Yeah,
makes
can
it
be more
appropriate
striking.
for use in educational purpose.
Yeah,
For example,
absolutely.
experience of hallucination. That's an experience. Unless you see it an experience, that understanding, empathetic understanding is difficult.
True, very true.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing your experience with us, and thank you for those of you who have connected with us today. As I gave the link in the chat, I'm gonna put that again before we close. So if you want to click on it, and you can also follow the website to have more information. And well, I will see you at the rest of the conference. But thank you for staying with us and enjoying the rest of the conference.
Thank you so much, Dr.
Thank you so
Neema,
much.
and
Thank
everyone else.
you. Thank you.